Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to spend your Monday with us. Welcome to Panel Fest. Over the next 2 days, we're going to have 11 critical conversations on very important topics in the craft beer industry right now. We're going to start today off with strategies for a pandemic. But first, we've invited Bruce with Precision Fermentation. They've been huge supporters of craft beer professionals. He's going to tell us a little bit about what they do for a minute before we dive into the conversation. Bruce, all you.
Hey, thanks a lot, Andrew. Hi, everyone. We're very excited to sponsor our Craft Beer Professionals Panel Fest. Just a few words about us. Precision Fermentation is the creator of Brew Monitor. It's a real-time fermentation monitoring and analytics system. Brew Monitor works with your existing tanks and delivers live fermentation data to your laptop or mobile device anytime, anywhere. It tracking dissolved oxygen, gravity, pH, temperature, conductivity, and pressure in real time. The system provides approximately 140,000 data points over the course of a standard 5-day fermentation, accessible through easy-to-use dashboards and graphs. Brew Monitor allows you to use any fermentation as a benchmark for all future batches of that style, eliminating guesswork and helping improve consistency. And the system automatically alerts you via text or email when any of the measured variables track outside of your desired range. Real-time fermentation monitoring allows you to quickly assess yeast vitality, prevent problems, fine-tune recipes, and monitor cellar-related inconsistencies while providing greater process control for a more profitable enterprise. Visit precisionfermentation.com to download a free white paper or try Brew Monitor for yourself with a no-risk money-back guarantee. And that's it about us. Thanks for having us. We really appreciate it, and we're proud, again, to sponsor this great event. And back to you, Andrew.
No, thanks, Bruce. I hope you enjoy your Monday and good luck getting started. I know you never sleep and you're always working hard. So thanks again for joining us. And at this point in time, we're going to welcome our guests to the stage. So first up, Marcus, welcome to the conversation. Devin, welcome. Laura, and we've got John Holl and we have got John Kelley. So I appreciate you 5 taking the time and joining us today for a conversation on strategies for a pandemic. What we're going to do a quick roundtable. Marcus, starting with you, 60 seconds or less. Tell everybody who you are and why you're here.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me here. My name is Marcus Ohanesian. I'm the part-time marketing manager over at Timberyard Brewing Company out in East Brookfield, Massachusetts. So that's right in central Massachusetts, about an hour west of Boston. I'm also the owner and designer at Perfect Evolution, which is a design and online marketing strategy agency for craft beer marketers. I have lots of experience in the craft beer industry, love drinking craft beer, obviously, which is a huge component of it, but come from a design and online marketing background as well.
And while Marcus is here, thank you again for this amazing new Craft Beer Professionals logo. We're really excited to have it moving forward.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Glad to see it in
Devin, you're up. Yeah, it's great.
Hey everybody, Devin Hoffman. I'm a digital marketing specialist with SiteSeeker. We're a full-service marketing agency here in Utica, New York. But I've been with SiteSeeker for about 3 years. But prior to that, I worked for about 10 years at the Saranac Brewery here in Utica as well, in the gift shop, tour center, and event side. And so when I kind of transitioned from the brewing industry to the marketing industry, I wanted to stay as close to the brewing industry as I could. So we still try and focus a lot on helping brewery partners. And when the pandemic started, we started trying to get together information and ideas that could keep them top of mind and still help them move some product. And so obviously, as this year has gone through, staying closely with groups like this one, we've continued to try and help with some of those ideas.
Thanks for being here, Devin. And Laura, you're up.
Oh, okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Laura Lodge. I am the founder consultant with craft beer programs, customized craft beer programs. I also wrote a book called Distribution Insight. It's based on my experience with my brother in the distribution industry in the late 90s and early 2000s. And that's really where I was introduced to the craft beer industry. From that period of time, the Big Beers, Belgians, and Barley Wines Festival was born and developed. And I have ended up expanding what I've done into the resort world. I help a lot of destination resorts develop craft beer programs, and have since expanded beyond that to a lot of other luxury programs that I've done, and a lot of destination pairings, and just kind of a a soup to nuts mix of things, all craft beer. So customized craft beer programs is the big umbrella for that stuff. I'm pleased to be here. I've been in the industry for a long time, and it's nice to have such a distinguished panel to join.
No, it's always great to learn from you, Laura. And I always enjoy our conversations, Laura. And John Holl, you're up.
Yeah, I'm still not sure why I'm here, but I appreciate the invite. So thanks
well,
for
you
that.
Can talk
Andrew.
about anything more than about even Laura. So you always have great wisdom to share and great opinions to put on the table.
I feel like that's you saying that I'm really good at BS, which I guess some people think that my profession is full of, but I strongly disagree. I'm John Holl. I've been a journalist since 1996. I've been covering the beer industry for almost 20 years now. And these days I'm doing a lot of audio. So I'm the host of the weekly Drink Beer, Think Beer podcast with new episodes every Wednesday. I'm co-host of Steal This Beer, which has been on the air for 6 years now that I do with Augie Carton. That's every Monday. And then, of course, the BYO Nano podcast, which comes out on the 15th of every month. And that's partnered with Brew Your Own magazine as well. I've written a couple of books. And these days, I'm also the contributing editor at Wine Enthusiast magazine, where I do all of the blind beer reviews and some editorial coverage. And so I'm all over the place these days, but loving covering a dynamic and changing industry. So thanks again for having me.
No, glad to have you. Glad to have you on the other side of the table this time around. And John Kelley, you're up.
All right. Well, guys, I'm John Kelley. I am the CEO and co-founder of Craftpeak. If you guys are familiar with Craftpeak or not familiar with Craftpeak, we are an Asheville, North Carolina-based technology startup. We've been around for about 5 years. We work with breweries all over the U.S., some in the U.K. and Australia. And really, we designed Craftpeak as an organization that would be able to kind of get in the trenches with breweries, understand some of their most critical business challenges, and then develop technology solutions to do that. So we have a suite of innovative e-commerce and web solutions that are really empowering breweries to kind of change the way they do business. And we spend a lot of effort with strategy, getting the right people in place, and implementing the right technologies to kind of help our breweries address new markets and kind of navigate this digital transformation.
Well, John Kelley, it's nice to talk to you on a day other than Wednesday. I know that's when we normally have our conversations, but glad to pull you out on a Monday to share some wisdom with the group.
Monday works too, man. Cheers.
Cheers. Now, Laura, you were one of the last people that I actually had the opportunity to see before this pandemic started. I remember when I first came up to you in Richmond, I didn't know whether I should hug you, shake your hand, or give you a high five or an elbow. And it was kind of like an awkward moment between you and I right then and there, because you were like, I don't know if I want to touch him type thing. And that was right when, we were first learning what COVID was. And I think at that Accelerate workshop in Richmond, a couple of days after it ended, that's really when the world shut down. So, just thinking back, that was early March. So much has changed when we've had these conversations early on about what you can do to survive a pandemic. It's almost silly to think back to these conversations we had in April, and now we're in December still having similar conversations. But it's really fun to look back and see what's been successful, what hasn't been successful, and just really take it and try to get a plan forward, because that's something we didn't have before. And now I think we have more of a plan, what we can do to at least make it through. Now, in October 20, I put out a survey that was answered by over 2,000 respondents, and it asked, what are the top 3 criteria for visiting a brewery? And 62% of people said the beer quality. Obviously, the beer is the anchor of our industry. It's hugely important. In December, a few days ago, I put out another study, and I asked, when you're picking up beer to go, what criteria are you looking for? And 72% said the beer selection and beer quality. So beer quality and selection is a little bit more important than when you go to a brewery, because when you're going at home, you don't get that overall experience. But over the past decade, in 2010, we saw a little less than 2,000 breweries. Now we're at over 8,000 breweries at the most recent Brewers Association count. But with the tap rooms closed right now, what had become a differentiating factor over the past decade, that tap room experience, it's changed a whole lot, as we know. And in the current state of things, how can we keep that human connection there? What are some of the suggestions that you guys have seen to maintaining that engagement with your guests when we're trying to still have these in-person, interactions through the pandemic? The floor is anyone's who wants to jump on that one.
I'll dive in here. So over at Timberyard, we've kind of rethought a lot of our taproom space. So kind of, working with what we got and kind of rethinking and zooming out a little bit. So our tap room and brew house was an old lumber yard. So we basically refurbished it and kind of kept that same kind of industrial aesthetic, right? Wood and industrial piping and that kind of vibe to it. But in our back where our brew house actually is, has very high ceilings because it was made for big box trucks to actually drive through and pick up their lumber. So we turned that into a drive-through brewery. So you can basically purchase cans at the beginning. We built basically like a little ATM like kiosk with plexiglass for our staff to be in. Swipe the credit cards. A car will literally drive through the back of our brew house. You'll have all of our fermenter tanks on the side and everything. And as they punch in the order, it gets printed over to a receipt near the walk-in cooler where we have some other staff members. And as they're pulling around the corner, they're Instagramming it, they're putting it up on, they're going Instagram Live, whatever. There is some social media engagement that's happening because it's a really cool experience for them. They're sitting in their car. Our staff goes into the walk-in cooler, gets a couple 4-packs or a case or whatever. They pop the trunk, put it in the trunk, and then they're out through the other side of the garage door. So they literally, no contact, but it's a really cool experience. And we've kind of had to rethink a lot of that. Little to no construction, thankfully, but it's really made a huge impact. Obviously to keep our can sales and to-go sales pretty high during a pandemic, but also a fun experience to keep that customer engagement level very high as well. So we've really had some great experience with that. We kind of resurfaced it around Halloween to do a haunted drive-through. So keeping the same route, but having some crazy spooky dancers off poles and having people volunteer to scare people basically as they're coming through to get their cans. Rethinking that a little bit more, something a little fun. And then on the online side, we ramped up our Shopify store a bit and really focused on our web experience because merchandise is huge right now, especially with to-go can sales and not having that taproom experience. So all those have been successful. I'd love to hear what everyone else kind of did as well.
Were the people scaring people just simply not wearing any mask?
There were a couple, yes.
No. Marcus, as a brewery owner, though, have you seen more focus on trying to maintain engagement or more focus mainly on trying to keep that COVID-friendly environment?
I think it's a little mixture of both, to be honest. We're doing everything per the Massachusetts standards and guidelines that obviously are ever changing. But we obviously want to keep the engagement level. And thankfully we have a very large tap room. We have a lot of outdoor space as well for a beer garden. So in the summer months, it was great. People were more than happy to go outside and sit outside and have a beer. And we had some socially distanced musicians playing way out as well. So thankfully and gratefully, we have a lot of land to do that. Now that it's getting colder here up in New England, it's a little bit harder to have people come to the tap room. People want to just get their cans and food to go, which is fine. It's still supporting us, which we're thankful for. But yeah, it's been a struggle to balance that both.
Well, thanks for sharing all that.
I've been talking with a lot of brewers over the course of the pandemic, and the way that I've sort of seen the evolution is brewer owners, taproom staff, anybody at a brewery who's interacting with the public has really seen not just a transactional relationship that maybe there was in the past, but this sort of shared experience that everybody's in it together, that everybody is wearing a mask, everybody is thinking about everybody's safety, and that it's brought a new level of consumer engagement and consumer respect to a lot of businesses, certainly breweries as well. One brewery owner told me not too long ago that he's learning to smile with his eyes, that he's trying to really make that connection with people, to exude warmth that normally he would, try to smile or, give away, but something that sort of conveys that, because it's those small personal touches. It's those small human interactions that I think so many people are missing right now, that any brewery that can connect with people on a level aside from an elbow bump or a long distance wave is going to do really well in this whole thing. And of course, can sales and merch and everything else like that is important, but any way that you can show genuine human interaction or affection is so needed right now, and leaves the customers who are leaving your place with a better sense of service and place and warmth.
So far, both Marcus and John Holl have talked about to-go as being an option that we're seeing more and more of these days. Do either of you have any suggestions for maintaining that level of engagement during the to-go experience?
I think if you have that 5 or 10 seconds with a customer, it's getting into a good headspace of being like, okay, like this is a unique interaction for this person. It might be rote for me at this point, but for the person who's coming through the door, this is going to be a unique interaction with them. So you just have to keep that top of mind. If you're having a tough day, sometimes that's going to slip, but treating everybody like they're an island, like a silo, because of the interaction level, I think goes a long way.
Yeah, I'll echo that a little bit and just say, trying to treat every customer like it's their first experience, and really nurturing your current customers as well. So especially with such a short interaction through like a drive-through, for example, or if someone's just popping in to grab cans into the tap room and then they're out, that's still just as valuable, if not even more valuable, than someone sitting in your tap room for an hour and a half having beer, and that whole experience as well. So our staff is trained not only to know how to talk about beer and our beer specifically, and help the potential customer, but also just like John Holl said, be a human, have empathy towards the customer. We're all going through this at the same time. We're all trying to figure out how to smile with the mask on, things like that. It's like we're all people at the end of the day. So let's be treated with equal respect and have a great experience. At the end of the day, we're all just drinking beer.
Yeah, guys, I'll jump in. Just
I've also seen some.
To maybe echo. Oh, go ahead, Laura. I'm sorry.
Oh, just quickly, I've also seen some super community connection between off-premise liquor stores and their local breweries. There are some that don't normally package, and I saw one of our off-premise liquor stores reaching out to his local brewery saying, hey, can we offer you some shelf spots? Can we engage and bring you in a place where you might not normally want to, or, have done the work to be in, but we obviously know you need that, and we're happy to be that community support for you. And I thought that was really cool.
And Laura, because you are such an educator, what best solutions have you seen for breweries being able to educate, their guests, whether about their beer, their story, just their current COVID-related practices through the pandemic so far? Any favorites?
Well, I've seen a lot of online pivot, which I'm sure everybody here could address. I think one of the more interesting places is how the off-premise liquor stores have tried to continue their education attempts and their interface with their customers while not having the same opportunity to visit with them, and how to make that online shopping experience work at all, really. But I've seen a lot of successful brewery pivots. I think more breweries really need to jump on the bandwagon there. A lot more of happy hours or product launches or brewery tours or tasting with the brewmasters, things like that you can really offer if you put it out there and get that connection going.
I think that's a good tie-in for John Kelley right now, because John Kelley and Craftpeak and Arrive put out a recent study, and one data point really jumped out to me. It was that only 18% of the breweries that responded are currently doing virtual events. So, John, tell us a little bit about what you think about that stat, and kind of follow up with what Laura said about just how we can engage, and she touched on the virtual events.
Yeah, well, my opinion of that stat is that it shows us that we've got a lot of room for growth. There's a lot of green space out there with people wanting to have and trial different kinds of events. And I think it's, I'm so glad to see how this conversation got kicked off, because Marcus, I think your example of Timberyard is like a perfect example of like what I want people to hear about how breweries are like adapting themselves. And, between you and John, the discussion around humans, I mean, it's so easy in a technology company. I've spent a lot of years in technology where, you're getting too focused on the code and on the capabilities, that it's always really important to make sure that at the end of the day, it's always about human connection. No matter what you're using, it's still connecting with humans. And I think there's a couple of things that brands and Marcus, I think you guys are already doing a great job of this. And I'll have some questions for you maybe as part of this panel discussion of what that looks like for you guys moving forward, because I think it's a great template for a lot of breweries. But I think what we're talking about here is the interaction between a brand and your customer base. And what we're finding is that it really comes down to a couple of things. The brand, right now consumers are the first question that they're asking is, are we going to be safe? Are we going to be safe interacting with you? The second thing is, am I going to be able to get what I want? Well, that comes back to the quality of beer, but it's also the access that you provide. So what Marcus has done and what I see other breweries doing is changing and innovating the way that they've traditionally done business. You know, it used to be that we showed up in the tap rooms, we had the beer, and you know, we had that experience. Well, that's not a possibility for us anymore. So the really thought forward thinking and thought leaders out there in the brewery space are changing that model. But they're still providing access, and it's access to consumers in the way that they feel most comfortable with your brand. Some people are going to be ready to go right now. They want to come back full bore. They're going to be hanging outside. Great. There's others that are going to be a little bit more skeptical. There's going to be people that want to adhere to some of the safety protocols. So I think what I've seen is the evolution of craft beer brands, and really that's all craft beverage brands, that are now looking for different ways to connect with those consumers while maintaining that human element. Now, they're leveraging technology a lot of times to do it, but you can't forget the human element in this. You can't forget the customer experience that you're trying to achieve, and make sure that your tools are working in support of that. So just a couple of thoughts for you, Andrew.
No, thanks for sharing. Devin, I'd like to throw the floor to you, because that touches on a lot of things that you're interested in.
Yeah, and I think, and Marcus, your example of what you're doing is you know, one of the best I've heard. And one of the things early on that I had seen, or that I would try and preach to people, is just clarity of process information, whether it's signage at the actual brewery itself, if there was a drive-in, or just outside. I knew places that were doing pre-orders, and then you would call when you get there. But if there wasn't a sign telling the person that, they were just jamming on the door trying to get in. But also, you know, in utilizing social media so that there was clarity for people who maybe were planning to visit you. What I think has been really incredible of utilizing opportunity in this year, and I'll speak kind of specifically to what I've seen here in New York. Previously, breweries weren't allowed to ship direct to consumers here in New York, and they temporarily lifted that. And early on, going back to like March and April, a lot of the discussions I was having, brewers were like, I don't know if that's going to make enough of a difference to, you know, to open that can of worms. And when they finally said, let me try it, they almost couldn't keep up, because there were so many orders coming in. I knew people who had to stop orders because they literally couldn't fit the boxes in their truck to take to the post office. And that gave an opportunity to do some of those events, because now you could put product in front of people. I had an opportunity to try beers that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to try, just because they were maybe too far away from me or weren't distributed in my area. And I saw them post on Facebook or in an Instagram story, or in one way or another put out there, hey, we're shipping this as a, you know, social distancing themed beer. And I'd say, okay, I'm going to jump on this and I want to get this. And there was maybe a 4-week window where I just kept having boxes of beer sort of delivered to my door, but it gave me an opportunity to, you know, try new things and also support. But then that's kind of where the thought came in, John, to your point of, you know, what's the next step of that? Now, how can you tie that into an event? Maybe it is something where it's a virtual brewery tour with the brewmaster, and I'm actually drinking the beer that they were brewing, you know, in real time, and some of the different elements like that. And so I think, you know, actually, you know, looking at opportunities to kind of continue with those sales, and then tying that into like clarity. And actually another thing I've seen, if you told me a year ago today that there would be breweries doing direct to door delivery, you know, I would have thought I'd be excited a year later, but I never saw myself on Google Maps trying to map out what a 45-mile radius, and if I fell into this circle so frequently. But I just thought that was a cool opportunity, because there are people who, like you said, Andrew, who are going to be lining up at the door, tell me what I got to do and I'm coming in. But there will very much also be people who are like, I'm not, you know, and so how do you get things into their hands as well? So I think there's been a lot of great things that I've seen this year to do that.
There's so many good points we can touch on from what you've just said, Devin, but I want to first focus on like the social media aspect. You mentioned that you saw it on Instagram, Facebook, wherever. You know, how have breweries had to step up their social media games through all this? You know, when I look at the taproom experience, before it was just posting about the, you know, the experience, the beer. Now they're also posting about how they're adhering to COVID protocol. Do you believe, and Devin, we'll start with you on this one, that just the social media presence of breweries has gotten more complicated, more detailed? How has it really changed the past, since March?
Yeah, I think, and it's a great point, and I think it created a need for more regular transparency of information. If I looked at a pinned post that was done in May and it said, here's our COVID guidelines, by the next day, that probably wasn't, what those guidelines were anymore, because it changed so frequently. So there was this need to consistently put information out there so people knew, and because not even just at their location, but maybe their region, their state, things are constantly changing. But aside from like that, from here's what we're doing within what we're able to do, I think I saw, I saw a huge uptick in people, creating something to engage with. I mean, people, when they first had to be kind of stuck inside and the weather wasn't great, going back into like March and April, and now we're starting to see that again now. They just want something different to do. They don't want to watch Netflix anymore. They don't want to. And so they turn to their phone. And so I would spend hours watching Instagram live stories of breweries filling crowlers, but like talking us through if they knew the person or a story or something. And I was like, oh, this is pretty neat. And so it was something for me to engage with. And I learned about a lot of new breweries through doing that. I mean, even this group, Andrew, that you've created, I think if I had to figure out how many breweries I follow, it's probably 75 times more than it was 6 months ago, which has been fantastic for learning what other places are doing. But what I also think has been huge, because I've seen them, is they're starting to run a little bit more social advertising. And they're going after audiences of people like me who are interested in the product. And so I see, as I scroll through my feed, a lot of posts about in-state, for New York at least, shipping that's available. And I'll constantly jump on it, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, and say, oh, yep, I want to pick up a 4-pack of that or something, because they're targeting me.
That's a great addition. And we have a question in the comments that's pretty relevant right now. Josh at Carbach Brewing, he commented that they're shifting away from more so virtual beer dinners, brewery tours, and focusing more on short form educational outreach content like that. In the current state, 6 months ago, we saw a lot of brewery dinners on Facebook, Instagram that were, somewhat successful. But now, what are some of the examples that you five have seen that have been good current methods that breweries are using to outreach via social media, besides, your typical posts? Like, what type of, virtual events these days are working? Laura or John, have you guys seen anything, unique?
Yeah, I think I was talking into mute there. So, typical Zoom behavior for me. I think the Devin brought up a good example. Devin, and I don't know if you were using a specific example when you were kind of describing the virtual tour, and knowing that we've got an audience member that's kind of moving away from it. But if you look at, we look at our breweries for inspiration, and we've got a lot of people doing some really creative and interesting things. And I think if you guys are familiar with like Duration Brewing in the UK or Two Tribes, I think those are two examples of brands that are really doing some cool stuff. Now, one of them is a virtual tour, but it's just like the example that Devin was talking about, where what you do is you sign up for it. You get 4 beers sent to you. You get a notebook from a local artist. And what they're going to do is they're going to send that package to you. You're going to get it, and then everybody gets on for a virtual tour of that brewery, and they go through a virtual tasting with the brewer. So you've got the beers sitting in front of you. They're all going through the same thing, and it's ended up being so they started that kind of in the April timeframe, and it's something that they've just been building off of consistently. So they started off with like a great concept, and it's just something that's kind of taken off. Two Tribes, as another example, is really moving more towards what we're seeing a lot of our American breweries start to request. So we've got breweries that are shipping beer all over the place, curbside pickup, delivery. And what Two Tribes is doing is they're basically, they're leaning into the kind of the lockdowns that were going on in the UK. They're putting together what they call a lockdown box. Their brewers are going to select, 12 beers that they're going to put in that box. These are former executive of Island Records, so they're going to put a vinyl record in there. They're going to put a recipe for a dinner. They're going to send you some hot sauce for that dinner. They're going to send you some other tools. And it's a monthly subscription now that you get that box once a month showing up on the doorstep, and each month is kind of a new story and new collection. So I think that we're just beginning to scratch the surface with where these concepts can go. But I think, the inspiration is there. There's a lot of people that are doing some really fascinating things, but you look at Instagram for inspiration, you look at what some of the breweries are doing out there that are doing things a little bit differently. And I think that there's really going to be the opportunity to kind of improve on what we're seeing in the market today.
Anybody else have anything they want to add to that point?
I'd probably say, yeah, I think what it's seeing is people who want to do versus watch, and so it's kind of a question of, how does it become more interactive? One thing I saw some places do that just is really neat is they started creating homebrew kits of their beers. And so they're going to ship you all the things it would take to brew their beer. And the examples I've seen, it's essentially a kit that comes, but I think it'd be really neat to kind of go that next step and then say, and you can tune in at a certain time if you buy this, and we're going to kind of walk you through that process. I know there's a brewery out in Buffalo, that Big Ditch Brewing Company, that did it, and I think their kit sold out in like 40 minutes. And so just kind of, for people that live near or far and know the brand or want something to do over these next couple of weeks, it's beer themed, it's brand themed, it's people themed, but it's more than essentially just watching.
Yeah, I think you truly have to innovate. And I presented it at a course the other day, and I literally said, if we have to drink every time we hear the word innovation, pivot through all this, we'd all be just wasted already by, 11 in the morning. But innovation is so important during this whole pandemic, because if you're not innovating, you're falling behind. And Devin, that example you just gave of just a homebrew kit and it's selling out immediately is a really cool example. And Marcus, your example of the haunted brew house, they're just really unique examples how you're making the most of a bad situation. Looking at these innovations as a whole, and just keep drinking, everybody at home if you're playing along, what are some of the coolest innovations you've seen your other breweries do and other clients that you're working with do that they've done to make it through this pandemic? And on the other hand, have you seen anything that's been a complete fail? But anyone who's even had those complete fails, everything is worth trying. I think that's important, that whether it's going to succeed or fail, you don't know. You're really just trying to, hold on to and survive the best you can. But looking at the innovations, what have you five seen that's been very successful or at least unique through the pandemic?
Yeah, I'm always happy to jump in on this one, guys. So I think it's exactly what you said, Andrew. Like, as long as you're trying something right now, like, that goes a long way. And if you're trying something, you're measuring the results and you're iterating right now, that's a recipe for success. And I think, that's really important. I think that's inspirational for a lot of breweries to hear. We had a number of breweries that were maybe sitting on their hands in the very beginning, and we had others that kind of started adapting right away. And there's a significant difference between the ones that have continued to iterate. Like, once again, their businesses are probably not going to look the same they did a year ago today, but they found a way to make it work. And I think the other thing is that the breweries that are taking the opportunity to reach out right now. There's Devin brought up a great example, but there's many examples out there where breweries are actually increasing their market share because they're connecting with consumers in different ways in different places that they've never done before. It used to be I had to be in town, in your geography, with your tap room open for me to be a customer of yours. Now, if I've got a 24/7 store and you're going to ship me beer, that opens up an entire new world. And the breweries that are taking advantage of that, the breweries that are going after that, are going after market share that was probably owned by other breweries that might be, not being able to kind of connect with folks in that way.
It's interesting to that point, though, because right now, COVID has helped relax some of the state laws that allow for shipping beer, that allow for getting out of state, allow for delivery, allow for all of that. We don't know what's going to happen after COVID. And I know that a lot of the local guilds are working towards that, but the breweries that are benefiting from that now should really also be thinking about the long game, because now that it's been out there. We've seen that it works and that it's working for them and working for your individual state. There's really no reason to roll back these laws that were in place beforehand. So I'm hearing that a lot of breweries are working with their local guilds, because that's where the real power is these days, in the local guilds. You know, the national BA, I think, is still trying to fight the fight on Capitol Hill, which is great. But aside from that, the real fights are going to be on the local level with changing the beer laws. And so if brewers are not involved with what's taking place in their state houses and behind the scenes and with their governors and their local ABC boards, now is the time to get involved, because that stuff can be snatched back almost immediately when executive orders are rolled back and emergency orders are rolled back. And so the breweries that are surviving on that, with that lifeline right now, that's not guaranteed. So the work has to be done in every state and every area right now to make sure that that can continue, if that's something that has been viable and that they want to continue.
Yeah, John, that is such a great point, and I'm glad you said that, because there are, I know, especially down here in North Carolina, there are all the breweries associations in the Southeast are now teaming up to make this a more cohesive effort. And you're absolutely right. These are temporary relaxations in many cases that exist right now. But as we talk to former regulators, as we're talking to leadership at FedEx, as we're talking to leadership at Sovo Ship Compliant, there's a lot of indicators here that these things can become permanent. Because they've rolled them back, things have gone great. As long as things don't go bad, there's not a strong argument to put those things back in place. But this is the time to do it. This is the time to organize. This is the time to keep pushing this forward. And if we really believe in the economic force from the 8,000 breweries that are in the U.S., we really believe that they should have the right to sell their beer. We look at wine and we compare it to what's going on in beer. There's a distinct difference there. So the opportunity is to at least get to where wine is and hopefully beyond that. And I think that we've been moving in that direction. COVID has certainly accelerated that. But John, you bring up a great point that those things can go back unless we really start to be more active in our participation in that at this point.
Thanks, John Kelley.
And gentlemen and Laura, I think, we can all agree on a couple things today. E-commerce is necessary. If a brewery doesn't have that store on their website right now, they're already behind. And we also hope that, all these regulations don't go away. But craft beer, we hear drink local, drink local, drink local. But when we're talking about things like, Devin, you mentioned getting beer shipped to you, there's also the think national approach there too. Is there a certain look of brewery that we're seeing more successful with the e-commerce style? And Laura, I'd love to hear your insight on this, like thinking from the distribution angle, are all breweries going to be successful trying to ship their beer nationwide, or what is the ideal profile of a brewery who's going to succeed with these larger and greater ideals of just getting their beer to more people outside their own region? And on the other hand, are breweries going to fail at it?
Well, I think you're seeing breweries of all sizes and all stripes attempting this now, some of which are positioned to succeed and some of which haven't really been on a national platform with this kind of direction before. So I think it's going to be those who understand how to connect on a national scale, how to get the word out there, that they are available for direct-to-consumer shipping, for example, where they haven't been before. Some of these breweries are tiny, tiny, tiny and had no plan to be on any sort of national scale for the next few years because they need to build their brand locally. And all of a sudden they're jumping onto a national direct-to-consumer plan. So I think it's going to be how you can translate your brand and your identity and your story and how savvy you really are on social media, because right now there's not really another way to do that. You need to get people to your website. Your website needs to talk about who you are in a very clear way in order to make that happen. And you're going to have all of your shelf stability stuff in order that you may not have had to really deal with if you were only operating from a tap room. You might not have had to deal with the packaging issues and the longevity issues and all of the ways to do or not to do on a direct-to-consumer national shipping basis. So I think there's a number of components there that are really going to test that newbie that doesn't really have packaging or shipping in mind, from the communication of the website and the branding success and and the actually getting beer to you, the end consumer, in a way that is the way they want you to drink it. So it's going to be or is currently a test to see who can do that. And the people who really succeed at that, I think, are the ones that are going to make the most from this opportunity.
Now, Marcus, I'd like to ask you, because you're the only brewery owner in the room right now, have you guys launched, I know you have a store on the website, but have you thought about shipping outside of your area?
We have not really. We've kind of kept it more in the local side of things. We did sign on with a distro company at the beginning of COVID to kind of ramp up a lot of the production. That is in relation to kind of getting our cans to more visibility. So we're about an hour and a half outside of Boston. So our beer is not making it even out to Boston, never mind Western Mass, never mind, upstate New York where Devon is, that whole area. So we've signed on with that, and that's helped increase the visibility there. But we haven't even thought about, shipping beer, basically. It's been all merch and gift cards and stuff like that, easy soft items to kind of ship, and keeping it simple. Like Laura said, just kind of keeping it, making sure that you have the core foundation in place of your website, your branding, your store. I'm sure John Kelley has lots of thoughts on this as well. Diving into getting a solidified foundation, before you can put really emphasize and put marketing dollars behind anything, you need a core, solid foundation of your branding and website and packaging and everything else like that. I think that's first and foremost before we even talk about pivoting, because obviously we all know first impressions are first impressions for a reason. They need to be on point before the business can pivot because of this whole pandemic thing. You have to have the foundation and solidification in place first.
Yeah, Marcus, I'll jump in. I appreciate that, man, and I'll try not to get on my soapbox here, but I think keeping it simple is absolutely right. There are certain brands that announce that they're going to be shipping and they're not going to have a problem selling out all of their beer. We all know who those brands are, and there's one strategy for those brands, but let's not be deluded to believe that that's a strategy that's necessarily going to work for everybody else. So let's see. I think that what we'd like to do is absolutely make sure that you got a solid foundation, but keep it simple. Maybe if you're considering shipping, start by rolling it out to within your state to an area that you don't typically service, and then develop a beachhead and then build from there. So I think keeping it simple is the right approach. If we know that there's certain brands that can ship everywhere, but I think, understand what your market is, understand where you're trying to go, think about it as developing a new market, and start simple and build on that.
Can I just say though that a lot of breweries that I've been talking to over the last 9 months have really sort of dialed into their local market. And it's nice to think about the other parts of the state or other states or going from there. But it's also helpful to realize how much does your local community actually know about your brewery? How much do they even know you exist? 8,000 breweries in the country, and a lot of folks who are watching this and in this chat room right now, we all live in this sort of bubble where craft beer is front and center for everything. The majority of the public still don't know. 13% of beer drinkers are still craft drinkers at this point. That's a very small number. So before you start thinking about going out of state or even out of county, are you doing as much as you can to get your local folks covered? Because they are the ones ultimately, I think, who will keep you going. If you're especially a small brewery, making 1,000 barrels of beer or less a year. So think about that. These are great grand plans for a 5-year plan and everything. But I think most people are thinking about the next 5 weeks, the next 5 months, before they can think that much further. And so, it makes sense to sort of look around you and see what you can do better there, because that's also not going to stress you out or tax your business too much, time-wise, financially, et cetera, going forward.
Investing locally is always a better idea.
Yeah, John and John, you both put great insight in there. John Kelley, you mentioned about we all know who the big guys are who are able to succeed on the national level with this shipping. And John Holl, you talked a lot about why it's important to go local. Now, Devin, I'd like to turn the table to you on this one. what marketing strategies that have been cost effective have you seen that breweries have been really using to kind of own their local area? I was at a meeting with some entrepreneurs the other day, and one of the people there with me said, your goal as a business person should be to own the mile. And what they meant by that was the area closest to where you're operating. And while, there's a lot of community in craft beer and there could be a couple breweries within the mile, it's very, very important that your most loyal customer base is probably gonna be the people closest to you. Devin, how can we connect virtually with them, and what are the best marketing strategies you've seen to succeed with that?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And speaking specific to this area, it's very interesting. Maybe 3 years ago, I think there was 2 breweries, and within 30 miles of me. And now, there's probably 9 or 10, 3 of which have opened in the last 6 or 8 months. And so those ones have a very, to John Holl's point, they're not opening their doors and saying, how do I infiltrate the West Coast? Because they're just not there. Because even when they opened, they couldn't fill cans or crowlers or growlers or anything. They could only do pints just because of their size. So what they had to do is get awareness out there and let people know. And a lot of conversations I've had with friends locally, they'd say, oh, wait, I didn't know a new place opened, over there, or something like that. What I've seen, though, not necessarily locally, but on a larger scale, and it goes back to a word you said earlier, but it was creativity. And what I've seen is breweries have rolled out new beers. One of the things that people would text me pictures of as they saw them in different areas, wherever they may live, were things that kind of were themed about, what we're going through. It was just an IPA, but it had, it was named, a design was put together, low, branding, around doing haircuts in their bathroom themselves, or leaving the camera on a Zoom call when they go to the bathroom or something, something like that. I saw a lot of those, and to the point where it stopped people in a store or while they were online, and they would take a screenshot or a picture to send to me and say, well, this is pretty cool. And usually I'd say, grab a 4-pack or grab the can if you can and save it for me, because I'd like to kind of make a row of those for down the road and say, I remember that. And so it was, it was leveraging creativity in a time, there's no secrets of, what's going on. Everyone kind of is going through the same thing, but it's, trying to have a little fun, not push to the side of, not looking at the severity of what's going on, but really saying, like, we're all in this. And, I've been stuck in the house for 2 straight weeks kind of thing, and do that kind of thing, or toilet paper shortages or whatever it may be. I saw a lot of that, and those things got shared, and those things kind of pushed out from a marketing standpoint.
Yeah, if I can chime in and make a really corny analogy here with the music industry. So in my past life, I was in the music industry playing bands and being a promoter. And the way that I've kind of, this constant comparison or parallel that I've been seeing is there's breweries, like Devin said, that are just starting up, and they're local bands playing in their local circuit, playing small 200 capacity clubs or smaller. And they're not going to go book a tour to go play Chicago when they're from Massachusetts, because no one's going to show up. So the way I see it is there's distribution companies, which are the record labels in this scenario, and there's the breweries, which are the bands, and you have to own your market, or own your mile, I think was the term that the phrase that someone just used. So in the music industry, the recommendation is before you start touring and trying to book these big places and book tours and try to make it big, you obviously have to own your mile and play your local market and sell those places out first before you can expand to larger markets. Obviously there's a devil's advocate play here that you can, choose the opposite side, but to really scale properly, I feel like, my constant parallel in comparison is being a local band versus being a nationally touring band. That's my bad analogy for the day.
I think it's a good analogy.
It's a good one.
The record industry comparison is a very interesting one, because, while craft beer in the hospitality industry has been really hurt, I think the music industry is arguably suffering even worse than, the craft beer industry these days. So no matter how bad and rough things get for us, unfortunately, there are people suffering more than craft beer.
Just to that point, really quick, we've seen one of the trends this year has been the charitable causes beer. We saw the All Together, and then Black is Beautiful, which did a great job. The Happy Hour guys, who have been doing web TV shows for a while, Jimmy and Mark, they just came up with the Curtains Up beer initiative, and I think they have a website for that. But it's brewing an IPA that they made with Gun Hill. It's that available recipe out for everybody, with proceeds going to help local arts communities, musicians, actors, folks who are out of work because of the pandemic right now. But Curtains Up is they're all friends of mine, so I wanted to give them a little love, and brewers that have done some of these other beers should probably check them out as well.
So that's an interesting transition there, John. We've seen so many collaboration beers right now, and just like all of us have, what we refer to as like Zoom fatigue, social media fatigue. What are your thoughts, John Holl, on collaboration fatigue? Do you believe breweries are getting tired of doing all of these collaborations?
No, I don't. Because I think that it's all of these, when you talk about All Together, Black is Beautiful, Curtains Up, there's been a few others, even Resilience, which was happening before the pandemic hit. And there was the Australian breweries did it for their wildfires at the end of 2019 as well, which feels like a lifetime ago. There is renewed interest, and these things get shared on social media, and they usually bleed outside of this craft beer bubble that everybody is living in. And so it can help bring attention to your brewery in a way that's sort of earned media, natural media, as opposed to just speaking to the same audience again and again and again. So I think being a part of that, and then, saying, okay, well, this is going to benefit this local acting company, or this is going to benefit this chapter of the NAACP, or whatever it is, that introduces your brand to a whole new market. So yeah, I don't think if somebody has fatigue with it, they're just not doing it the right way.
No, I absolutely love that. No, one thing I want to talk about right now is we talk a lot about innovation, but all this downtime, and we've had these closures through the pandemic, a lot of breweries have turned their focus to improvements, whether that's just, remodeling the tap room, upping their cleaning protocol. I think everybody's absolutely done that. From you five's perspectives, what neat improvements and just what valuable improvements, more importantly, have you seen through the pandemic where a brewery has just kind of step back and say, hey, we need to refine this process. We need to fix this. We need to better our equipment. How have you seen companies improve, from that lens?
Yeah, so on our side, we've definitely, go ahead, Laura.
Well, I was just going to say, I think one of the most important aspects of that process, and I've seen some cool things, is the mental health support that it provides everybody in the process, because it does get everybody off that dead center low-level trauma or higher-level trauma that we're all dealing with on a regular basis. When you start doing things like that, you're thinking forward, you're thinking ahead, you're strategizing, and it's enabling, it just helps you get off that traumatic, awful space. I've seen a lot of people reworking their tasting rooms, rethinking how their food program works or doesn't work, rethinking how their food trucks are great or not so great, and kind of trying to figure out how to do that. Talking about contactless or a different strategy for getting the beer to their customers. Just some real cool innovation, but some basics like painting that you just never get to. But I think that mental health piece is pretty awesome. They're not in the brewery necessarily to do yoga all the time anymore like they used to be, or do some of those fun, awesome team building things. Now it's more like, how can you help people?
The other thing that I've seen as well, and this is, I think, one good part of the pandemic, and mental health is 1,000% accurate, Laura, and people need to be checking in with themselves and their staff and their family all along, and realize that we're all going through this together, and that everybody is sort of, at their wits' end. My wife said to me just the other day that with the vaccine starting to roll out now, that when she finally feels that we're back on track and that things can get back to a little bit of normalcy, she just wants to get into bed for 3 days and cry, and then go to a really good party. And I think a lot of people feel that way. But what I've seen is brewers are really starting to think about recipes as well. And this is something that I've been harping on for years, but there's never been an excuse for anybody who calls himself a professional brewer to put out shitty beer. And if you're knowingly putting out diacetyl, if you're knowingly putting out oxidized beer, if you have a canning line where your DO isn't dialed in, and you're selling bad beer to customers to try to make money, that's fraud. and you need to stop that. And there have been a lot of breweries that were just running at 1,000 miles a minute to try to keep up. That the pandemic sort of helped them put the brakes on a little bit. And people, I hope, are starting to change some of their recipes, their brewing processes, so that by the time we get out of this, and even over the last couple of months, recipes have changed, have gotten better, and we're not getting shitty pints. We're not getting shitty cans. Exploding cans may be fun on the internet. It's just a sign that you're an amateur. And if you can't do that, seriously get out of the business, because you're ruining it for a lot of other people. And I know that's not a popular opinion with some of like the younger fans these days, but it's 100% true. So if you have a bad beer, if you've been putting out bad beer, use this time to change your recipes, to change your processes, and make sure that you come out of the pandemic cleaner. Vaccinate your beers.
Is that going to be the next collaboration campaign we see? Vaccinate your beers. I just like the tone of it. On to you though. I know you focus a lot on the e-commerce space. Have you seen a lot of breweries taking this time to improve their websites, or are the breweries you're working with already breweries that they got it? They got a little bit more of the business side of the industry already, or are you seeing those who might have had the John Holl explained exploding cans, understanding that they also need to improve their business, on the website front?
Yeah, I think it's across the board for sure. I mean, to Laura's point, this is an opportunity for breweries to kind of get out of the flow of the normal business. So get your head up, be a little bit strategic, which means that you probably look around at your business at this point, and there's lots of different improvements you can make, either on the production side, the sales side, the connection side, the branding side, all of that. So I know for a number of our breweries, it's also been an opportunity for ownership just to kind of say, wait a second, we're being forced to slow down here. We're being forced to take a pause. Like, is this the relationship that we want to have with our business moving forward? We expect that we're going to survive this, but is this the 17 hours a day, 7 days a week kind of experience that we want to have moving forward? And we've seen a number of our breweries start to change their business model a little bit. They're only going to work 5 days a week. Maybe their production numbers are down a little bit, but they're going to choose to sell their stuff through more of a high margin sales channel and double down in those efforts. So taking a fresh look at this, I think is an important component, and maybe the blessing in disguise with COVID.
And I'd say quickly with that as well, one of the things I noticed during this time, to John Kelley's point, was a cleanup of that. And actually, John Kelley and John Holl's point, a cleanup digitally of their brand. You know what I mean? So they have an equal representation online that they also have in store. And one of the things that was really important from an e-commerce side that I saw was making it user friendly, because that's one of the most important things, is that user experience. Because early on I saw when people were doing, let's say, direct to home, they didn't have the site or the e-commerce set up for that. And I remember there was a couple I ordered where I had to type the beer I wanted into address line 2 because there wasn't its own, or they had 2 brand lines and I had to go to 2 different websites and pay individual ship, and those kind of things. And so that was fine in week 1. But they use that time to say, okay, this might be bigger in the future. We need to clean this up.
Yeah, that gets a little messy when you're having to deal with an inefficient experience, whether in person or virtually. Now, while we could talk forever about all these fantastic topics, I am going to start to wind us down right now. I want to go back in a circle one more time. We're going to start with Marcus on this one, and I'm going to pose this question at the end of every panel over the next 2 days. What has been your greatest bright spot through the pandemic, through 2020? And Marcus, I'd love to hear, a bright spot either in your life or with your business that you've experienced this year.
Sure. That's a really great question. And thanks for putting me on the spot as number 1 for the whole panel fest.
Hey, we're just going in a circle. I'm not picking on you.
That's a good question. So I think I'll answer it in 2 parts, personally and professionally. So personally, I think it's really forced me to take a step back and slow down in my life in general. I also got a puppy during the pandemic, which has definitely helped my mental state of being. And it's forced me to get outside, go for walks, be more active as puppies do. So that's a plus right there. But it's forced me to, on the whole mental health subject, to really focus and take care of myself first, because we're all in this together, and we're not alone. We're dealing with it ourselves, but everyone is dealing with it in their own way. Personally, professionally, on the Timberyard and Perfect Evolution side of things, thankfully and gratefully, I'm in the digital space, which is, booming, for lack of a better term, a cliched term. So the e-commerce world and the design and online marketing world has really been a focal point. People have really zoned in on that. So I think I'm really thankful that I've picked the right career path, and I'm happy to help and dive into that with a lot of new clients that came on board.
Devin, you're up.
Yeah. So just like Marcus said, given my industry, transitioning from working in the office to working from home was pretty seamless, which I'm very thankful for. But from that professional side, and I'll speak specifically to interacting with breweries, it was a big opportunity for me to say I want to learn more, not just about the breweries, but their process, what makes them unique. Those are the types of things when I visit them in person, I like to see. Not let me do that virtually or digitally and try and introduce myself or learn more breweries, even in my area, which kind of actually then stems into, from a personal, standpoint, was just kind of keep finding things to do so that I don't morph into my couch. And like during this, I've been, I worked 10 years in the industry, and I've been a fan of beer since the minute I turned 21. And and this year was the first time I ever homebrewed. I started some friends, we rolled out 4 beers that we've done, and it was just, I knew the process. It was the first time I had a chance to roll up my sleeves and do it. As you can see, I'm an established painter. I painted this Jackson Pollock here that I display proudly. But I was like, I want to do stuff, you know what I mean? And even if I'm going to be home, what stuff can I do? So.
Yeah, I think just getting out and about like Marcus has, and just finding new hobbies to dive into. And I still need to find time to get back into home brewing. But no, I'm glad you found some positive from the year, Devin. And Laura, what about you? I know I've enjoyed following all the masks you've been helping create through the pandemic. So that's something I've seen as a positive through your pandemic experience. But from your point of view, what's a positive you've had in your life this year?
It's been really interesting to be in a whole different place. Cleveland is very different in the craft beer scene than Colorado is, for sure. So in addition to personally being in a new space full time, which is the same space I grew up in however many years ago, which is weird, but being an adult in this space, but being a beer person in this space is just very different, and finding your feet. But it's cool to see what still translates. The basics of the beer community are a little different here, but they're still real. And I've also found myself connecting more and finding a deeper appreciation for the relationships that I've developed over the years in the craft beer industry. Finding more that I can do from a distance, finding that validity of experience, regardless of the particular space I'm in, it still translates. And so that's been a really good personal feeling to find. It's taken a while to find it. We do also, my dad and I have a pandemic pet as well. So we have a kitty cat that's teaching me some new patience too. And, it's just good to be able to take that time to just play. And I haven't done that in a long time.
No, I love it. I'm glad you've seen some positives from it. And like you, I've really enjoyed the opportunity, albeit virtually, to connect with so many great people in the industry through all of this. So I've really enjoyed the conversation with you 5 today. So just another opportunity for us having a little human interaction to make the most of the pandemic. Now, John Holl, tell us a little bit about the positive you've seen in 2020.
So it's twofold. It's personal and professional, and I'll keep it short. But, I was traveling a lot over the last couple of years, at beer festivals or conferences or just for articles and everything. So being home and now having a 3.5-year-old and being able to hang out with her during the day, every day is awesome. I know all of the lyrics to both Frozen movies and all of the shorts as well. And I'm very proud of that. And, but the fact that I get to hang out with her, it has been a real great thing out of this, this really dark time. And, professionally, just after the beginning of the year, I launched my own business for the first time. With Andy Crouch, we launched Beer Edge, which does the Drink Beer, Think Beer podcast and the Beer Edge podcast and a newsletter and everything. And the chance to watch that audience grow, to really put our stamp on something, and to try to add to the media world that is covering beer has been really difficult. But also really rewarding at the same time. And just really quick, I just want to say to everybody that as small business owners, as small brewery owners, I know a lot of folks are looking for that support from consumers. Don't forget about media in that as well. There's not as much beer media as there once was, and subscriptions to magazines like BYO or to Wine Enthusiast, help support journalists, help support keep news out there. Subscribing to services that ask for subscription fees help keep journalists in business, help keep things going and covering the industry really well. Patreon for podcasts that you think are doing a great job. A few bucks, a buck or two goes a long way to help keeping independent media alive and doing really well. And so as much as you're all looking for the support from your local community, don't forget the people who are covering this community as well. And a buck or two to the places that you think are doing a good job helps keep us afloat. So there you go.
Definitely go and listen to John Holl's podcast. It's fantastic stuff. I enjoy learning each week from you. But like John said, the industry isn't just the brewer. Support everyone who makes your beer industry better, whether it's the journalists, whether it's people providing the yeast. There's so many people involved, and I think we're all in this together. John Kelley, on to you.
All right. Well, I know we're way over here, so I'll keep this really short. I'll also do professional and personal. From a professional perspective, I think it's one of those things when things are going really well. It's easy to be in a great mood, and it's easy to be collaborative, and it's easy to display a lot of positivity. It's only when things really become challenging that you figure out, what people are really made of. And I think that it's been inspiring for us this year just to see how this market has come together, just to see how this industry continues to push itself forward, to innovate, to remain creative, and to be adaptive and damn it, gritty. So I think that that's provided us a lot of inspiration working with our customers this year. And I think that's important that, this whole thing just didn't fall apart. We're dealing with good stuff here in this industry. The second thing on the personal side is I also picked up a puppy this year, my first puppy ever. This has been a learning experience for me, and that got here about a month before my first grandbaby. So between grandbabies and puppies, I've had an awesome 2020.
It's been quite the year, and I appreciate you five joining us today. Marcus, Devin, Laura, John Holl, and John Kelley. Your insight is much appreciated by myself, but also everybody watching. So thank you again, and here's to a even better 2021. I look forward to sharing a beer with all of you, both you five right here and everybody watching today, and hopefully the next year. So cheers, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your Monday.
Thanks, Andrew.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, everyone.